Call of Duty has made some absolutely disastrous mistakes over the years, but today it seems JGod might have found proof of how bad things have really gotten. The video we're going to be discussing is Warzone Modern Warfare 2019 versus Black Ops 6 2024. What's wrong? Starting right
So
now.
Black Ops 6 versus MW 2019. One of the things that I did want to talk about is it says that somebody ended up posting on this specific post, it said Black Ops movement versus the other movement.
And I will note, we have talked about this quite a few times, but specifically this clip I have in my video from yesterday that is hugely informative that I definitely recommend you check out after watching this one.
Go ahead and take a look at these. I went through and did a bunch of different side-by-side testing so we can take a look at and talk about the various things, because there's a lot of different subtle things that really differentiate the games that one ends up making the game feel clunky versus not clunky. First thing we'll take a look at is the crosshair bounce, and that's specifically the center dot, how far it moves from the center. So I have my own X built in there so we can see how far it moves. In MW 2019,
and the first thing I'm going to hop in here and note is that there have been some big changes. If you don't know this, coming from Modern Warfare 2019 into not Caldera, but Warzone 2 and Modern Warfare 2, there was a big change whenever it came to the crosshair, the visual recoil, the gun smoke and things of that nature. And it had such a great impact on a lot of players, and specifically mouse and keyboard players, that there was a huge shift in the input that most players are using. In fact, I used to be a mouse and keyboard main, and now I use a controller in all of my videos where I obviously play the game, which, by the way, if you didn't know, I make 30 videos every single month or more on my second channel, Expel Plus. If you're looking for loadouts, that's definitely the place to be. Either way, let's keep going.
the dot does not move. Obviously, your crosshair is spread out, so the individual lines right here, here, and here will move, but the actual dot stays fixed. In MW2,
and again, what he's talking about is your crosshair. It's obviously a little hard to see with the way he's got it set up, but I wonder if I can zoom in right here. You can see the crosshair. You got the up, the side right here, and your center dot is exactly what he's talking about right there.
Introduce this mechanic where as you move, your crosshairs will move to adjust and reflect what your gun is doing. This was a bad mechanic that IW introduced, and a lot of people just didn't really like. So much so that a lot of people put the default dot to fixed, even though that didn't align with the character model and led to some inaccuracies.
And if you go into the menus now, I'm not sure if in a second he mentions this, but you can actually change it to where you can either disable that or you can set it to where it's completely centered, right? However, that does cause massive inaccuracies because that dot is not where you're actually shooting. And to be fair, hipfire kind of sucks in this game, and there's no good hipfire builds like we had back in the day. However, it just completely screws up what you think you're looking at, especially if you're bouncing up and down or you're sliding or something like that, because it'll slowly move left or right. And that's actually a massive problem with snipers in this game, is that if you notice, your crosshair moves. So if you have a scope like this, your crosshair can literally be at the very edge of it. It's incredibly frustrating, especially from a mouse and keyboard player's standpoint. Again, I don't play on mouse and keyboard now. I switched because it just wasn't worth it anymore, and aim assist is too good, but it made it nearly unplayable for mouse and keyboard.
They've since basically removed that. So now everyone's forced to have the crosshairs that move. So we can go ahead and take a look at here. So if we're looking at the jump over on the MW 2019, the dot will stay in the center. And then this one, the dot will go bounce up and below that white line. So you can kind of see how that looks.
And I'll pause it for you. If you look right here, the dot is directly in the center, but this one is a little bit higher. Hopefully I show it a little bit better. When he goes down, it actually goes a little bit farther. Like right here, the dot is super, super low. I know it's nearly impossible to see on, your phones, but it is so much lower.
What it's doing there. And I think this leads to a lot of problems because it leads to a lot of more movement on the screen. And it kind of forgets the point that we were playing a first-person shooter. Cold War didn't really have this issue. Vanguard really didn't have this issue. Like I said, MW2 is when this got introduced into the engine. And it doesn't seem like any of the other developers have been able to take it out. So this is one of the first problems.
I will note, he mentions that it got added in with Warzone 2. That was the first time the engine actually changed, had a big change. And while now we're seeing, you know, a Black Ops 6 movement and things like that in the game, that is an engine swap. And it's why we had to revert a lot of things to the beginning of the year. Like every update basically got chalked. And they're adding things in very fastly right now, very quickly, because they're trying to fix the things that they kind of messed up. And sorry, I don't know if you hear it, but my air conditioner's taking a tinkle back there. Either way, the big thing is we had never had any real change whenever it came to the engine. Whenever Cold War was introduced, we actually saw that the engine stayed the same. They just threw the guns in, which is, in my opinion, what they should do. And then every once in a while, they should vault weapons. And I get that it's because people buy these skins, but there is something in the terms of service that says they can vault things like that. But I think it would be good if we vaulted it, then brought it back and vaulted it and brought it back, and different guns back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I think that would be a very healthy environment instead of having 180 weapons where only 5 are worth using at any given moment. And then we don't have to worry about, you know, whether or not the meta is super crazy. But either way, my point here is that the engine never actually changed until we got to Warzone 2, where they did change the engine a little bit. And now we're seeing another massive change with Black Ops 6, which is why things feel a little wonky right now.
They could revert and solve a lot of the problems. Even if you're going to keep the crosshairs pretty wide, how wide the hipfire spread is, keep that wide, not a big deal. But make it so that we're not having the movement of that if it's possible. And I know that's an engine level change that they have to go ahead and make happen. Next is mantle to fire, and these are pretty about the same. I didn't really notice much of a difference. Maybe MW 2019 is just a little bit slower. Black Ops 6 feels a little bit more fluid when it comes to this type of movement.
But they have a lot of different mechanics in Black Ops 6. I will note, like, the mechanics in Black Ops 6 and the mechanics that we got in Warzone 2 are very similar. I'm not going to lie to you. Of course, we have Omni movement now, but that's not as good as you think it is, right? But the mechanics that came with Warzone 2, things like mantling and ledge hanging and stuff like that, where that exists still, it actually slows you down quite a bit whenever you would naturally mantle very quickly over things in the original Warzone, just because you didn't have that, you know, grab the ledge and go mechanic.
The gun, the way it moves, everything's in there. I also took a look at single mantling speeds. So this is when you're mantling over something, essentially vaulting, not mantling up, but mantling over. And we can kind of see what this is doing here. They basically looked identical there. If we go back, like, just look as we go through, right across, boom.
I really do. I don't know if he's going to show like the exact timings of this, but I'm pretty sure Black Ops 6 is like a few milliseconds faster or something like that, because it does feel like you'll just go thoink, thoink, thoink right over walls sometimes.
So these ones are pretty identical. There's a lot of other stuff going on, as we'll talk about when we get to some of the visual shaking that's happening on the screen. But in general, the speeds are relatively the same when it comes to mantling. I know some people say mantling slow, but one of the big differences with mantling in MW 2019, you simply just couldn't mantle something. Like, it was too high for you.
Right.
And then in MW2, they introduced a mechanic where you can grab, latch on, pull up, go over. They've essentially, it's hard to compare the mechanic because we didn't have the mechanic before. You just were not able to mantle things. Head down.
Okay, but to a certain extent, that is, for the most part, obviously correct. That's what I was mentioning earlier, is where you grab and then you go up and over. However, that's not exactly how it works all the time. There's a lot of opportunities that existed in both 2019 and 2024 Warzone where you could just go up and over if it was like this height, right? If it's up to your chest height, you could grab it and go up and over. However, now that takes twice as long. And that's kind of the issue that we're running into. It's something that, to be clear, they have already addressed a little bit, and it's a little bit better, but I'm still dying to that to this day.
The head, I feel like it's better to be able to mantle more things, but that motion needs to just be faster. Pop up
100%.
Like a super soldier. Bunny hop. This is one that was more of a skill gap. We're going to see the MW 2019 one up atop. That one you should be able to get 1 to 2 bounces depending on your frame timing. They removed it. There's no opportunity to do it with a perk. There's no opportunity to do it with the skill. If you're off a higher elevation, it's not going to give you the momentum you need.
And I'm going to go back for just a second here. And the reason why is if you watch when he goes to try and bunny hop right here,
we're going to see the MW.
He's obviously got Modern Warfare 2019. I'm going to mute him for a second. And then when he bounces right here, he should show him ADSing. When he ADSs, look at how his sight bounces down. Like his gun is wobbling up and down. But whenever he goes back to Modern Warfare 2019 to show you, which I think he will, again, like look at this right here. Look how low that is on 2024. And then on Modern Warfare 2019, the sight stays like right dead center. And that's, again, another problem that specifically hurts mouse and keyboard players. And I get what you're saying. PC shouldn't be playing against console. Input and platform are not the same thing. There are plenty of players on console that play on mouse and keyboard. I'm not saying that there's a lot. There's like 10% across the board, basically, is what you need to understand about console input and mouse and keyboard on PC as well. It's always going to be around 5 to 10%, depending upon what time of the year it is, and stuff like that. How many players have given up their playtime? But it is a massive problem. If you are going to introduce something where you have two inputs facing head to head, you need to do your best to ensure that they are even across the board. Now, if that means, you know, controller's going to get aim assist, that's absolutely fine. However, you do need to account for that on the back end, like how much aim assist should they actually be getting? And you'll see stuff like that in X Defiant, where there is aim assist, but it's not nearly as strong in certain situations because they need to make it an even playing field, because they want to make sure that the players that are on mouse and keyboard and the players that are on controller are always on that even playing field.
A higher elevation, it's not going to give you the momentum you need. So unfortunately, you just get a dead. As soon as you jump, your momentum's dead. I wanted to take a look at reload speed. MP5 is very similar to the C9. They're not identical, but they're kind of going for the same look. And the reloads end up being basically the same. It looks like they're really close to each other. I checked them head to head. I think MW 2019 was just a little bit faster, and you could equip sleight of hand, which would make it a little bit faster as a weapon perk. That's not the main go-to for a lot of people. And then BO6, all you can really do is put on a smaller mag or the fast mags, and it'll solve for having a faster there. So I also wanted to take a look at the reticle shift while strafing. Because how far it goes off center. Obviously, we looked at the hipfire before. Now this is the reticle strafe. We can go ahead and see this. And what we're seeing here is a little bit more of a bounciness. You can see that not only right here where we can see this part of the gun is moving, that I just traced out more than this top portion. This optic portion has way more bob and weave, even if the crosshairs aren't like moving all over the place.
And this exact right here is what I was talking about. I'm going to go back to when he was actually showing it moving so that you can see it.
How far it goes off center. Obviously, we looked at the hip.
I'm going to mute him right here. But we're going to watch basically what he was talking about, where he drew it around, see how much this area actually moves whenever he's moving. So like this has a little bit of bob, but that center is staying in the center. This is focused on reticle shift, right? So it's staying in the center. However, the big issue is that it wiggles. That reticle is going to shift to the side. It's going to move a little bit. So when you are used to looking right dead center at your screen, right? You are looking like dead center. You're like this, and you're thinking, okay, if I shoot directly at the middle of the screen, how most players get tunnel vision, then you should be able to hit the enemy. But the issue is that where they try to make things more and more realistic, it actually hurts the casual player and pretty much all players because it makes it less of that like arcade type shooting. You're stuck with this like, all right, I've got to figure out where the hell my reticle is every time I shoot, because any movement changes everything, which is incredibly annoying. Oh, sorry. He's still muted.
And what we're seeing here is a little bit more of a bounciness. You can see that the traced out more than this top portion. This optic portion has way more bob and weave. Even if the crosshairs aren't like moving all over the place, the actual movement is a little bit more subtle, but it does have that bounciness of the strafe. Obviously, it's a little bit more realistic, but this is one of those things where you can see how little the VLK bobs compared to the
huge
Jason
difference.
2X or whatever it is. It just bounces all over the place. Here is also where you get the shift. Like we saw with the hipfire jump, MW 2019 does move. When you jump, it will jump. And MW 2019 had a jump fatigue mechanic so that if your first jump would actually give you the most height, and every subsequent jump would be slightly shorter until you took a quick break, and then it would allow you to get the max height jump. So we'll be able to show that off when we're showing these.
It was just a lot easier to track back in the day, I think, is the big thing. And now it's very difficult to track those things because it's moving so much, and you'd figure it's adding more of a skill gap, but I really don't know that it is.
Clips back to back. But one thing that was nice about the MW 2019 is it's straight up and down vertical, the movement, versus what we're seeing with the BO6. When you do the jump, it ends up kicking your crosshair off to the side. So if you look at that closely, you'll be able to know what I'm talking about. You can see kind of it moves slightly at an angle when it's 2019, so but nowhere near what we're seeing with the bounciness.
And I will note, if you are on mobile, what you can do is just pinch your screen and you can zoom into like the side just in case. I don't want to like zoom into one thing or the other because I know that most people are going to want to be able to see both at the same time. So feel free to zoom in yourself instead of having to, listen to me. But if you are on like a massive TV, you should be fine.
In the BO6, where that reticle is bouncing all over the place and kind of in a dramatic fashion, where it doesn't really look particularly well. Recoil, visual shake doesn't actually look as bad as I felt like it would be when you compare them head to head. So when we look at these, we can go ahead and just fire without really recoil control. You can see that there is some visual shake. These are the same FOB, essentially the same created class, essentially the meta build for the gun. XM4 for both of them. You can see when I'm controlling the recoil, they basically have the same fire rate. They line up. So not as dramatic as I would expect, but I think the big difference here is if we look at how much this part of the gun is moving. So this is right before it's fired. We'll go ahead and trace it just a little bit so you can kind of see the comparison there. There, that one's traced. Let's go ahead and go here just so you can kind of see how far it moves over. And that visual shake is where a lot of the problem happens. And this is actually where I think most of the visual shake is coming from. Obviously, further zoom optics and all that, they got to dial that in because there's a lot going on.
Yeah, this is kind of what I was mentioning a second ago with snipers, is that whenever it comes to snipers, it's very different. Like you can have these 3 times or 4 times or whatever it is, and they can be like a bit of a toss up whenever it comes to the vertical shake. But if you're using anything past that, which I'm not saying you should be, but anything past that, pairing that with flinch, again, if you're on mouse and keyboard, you're pretty much losing that gunfight. That's why it's always better to have something like a one-shot sniper. Because if you're on mouse and keyboard, if you have to take 2 shots, it's going to be impossible to see anybody. If you have to make shots at a longer range, basically. But I will note, that change has gotten a little bit better over time. Like in Warzone 2, it was absolutely horrendous. And I kind of wish that he would have showed that in this video, because the changes between Black Ops 6 and Warzone 2 is definitely great. Like, what am I saying? Yeah, Warzone 2 and Black Ops 6. From Warzone 2 to Black Ops 6, the visual shake and the visual recoil has gotten a lot better. And I don't think a lot of people give Activision or whatever company is doing it, whatever Activision child company is doing these things, I don't think they're given enough props for this. I think a lot of mouse and keyboard players obviously see it, but most controller players just don't know it's even happening.
But you'll see that the actual gun model is kind of what's shaking a lot more than what we saw in MW 2019. So we go ahead and press play.
Lord have mercy.
You can see right here, it's not moving particularly a lot.
Yeah.
But then right there, look at how big the gap is from where I drew different. It. And the gun moves quite a bit. So I think that's where they can dial in whatever those values are. Just double check whatever those values were in 2019 and then scale them back so we can go ahead and kind of work on that particular aspect. The other part is if we look at the reticle, we can also see that it moves a little bit. So focus particularly on the center of where those lines intersect. And you'll see that the VLK one moves slightly in 2019, very little. When it comes to Black Ops 6, we're seeing a little bit more above and below where we can actually see the black lines move a little bit off center. So here we go. So you can see how it's bouncing to the side and up. Subtle, not a crazy amount. Obviously, this is a low recoil gun, but if we looked at higher recoil guns, we see more dramatic. I just felt that I want to use the M4 and XM4 since they're a like
they're basically the
identical
same.
fire rate and stuff like that. Drop shot.
This is a big one. Now, this is one that we talked about in our video yesterday. The drop shot difference is insane. Now, I will note, I hate drop shotting. I hate people that drop shot. I think it's the grossest mechanic that you can possibly use, because you going from up here to on the ground is incredibly annoying. My goal is to always hit a headshot, right? I want to start at the chest, and as my recoil pattern goes up, I'm going for the head. That way I can get that tap on the head so that I eliminate faster. However, when people drop shot, and don't get me wrong, it's an incredible thing to do, and it will win you a lot of gunfights. But when people drop shot, you're starting at the chest. You've got your perfect centering. They drop. Oftentimes, you won't get that aim assist pulling down. And this is the exact same on mouse and keyboard. You obviously just won't see them. They'll just drop, and you gotta think fast in a split second. When other people just have the muscle control, the muscle memory to just press a button and they're on the ground. I really do hate it, but it is a huge difference now, and I'm happier with it now, because back in 2019 it was all over the place, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about in a second. But to each their own. I personally think a slower drop shot is better.
One thing with the drop shot in MW 2019 is when you drop down, you just drop down kind of smoothly, and the gun doesn't move too much. It's kind of like the foreground and the background. They work differently, right? One stays fixed and the other one moves a lot because you're actually moving. In BO6, they both move, and they both have like their independent movement, so that it kind of adjusts and gives you that wonky feel where it feels like a lot more shaking is going on. So
it's wonky, but again, the big thing is that the goal is to be more realistic, and that's why they do what they do.
That's what we'll see right here when we look at these drop shots, and it has a little bit of a bounce when you hit the bottom on BO6. So right here,
yeah,
there it is, boom.
Yeah, that's a huge difference.
And you'll go ahead and see them back to back. A little bit of a bounce on MW 2019, but how much the gun is moving, that wonky angle.
Dude, the difference between 2019, when you're looking at the top right here, you can literally see that nothing happens. Like, all you do is it's like you're just slowly going down an elevator. But when you're on Black Ops 6, when you're on Black Ops 6, it's literally moving your body. You're like shaking your character. When its elbow hits the ground, it shakes the gun a little bit. But the difference is immense. And I don't know if it's because in 2019 they were going for a more arcade style shooter, or if it was just a happy accident and people ended up loving it for that. But that is not necessarily the problem that I have. The problem is the speed at which you drop shot. I think that it should be smooth. I don't see an issue with smoothing that out and making it like 2019 when it comes to the shake, getting rid of that shake. But I don't like... Right, I don't like a very fast drop. I think a fast drop is just, it causes a negative impact on the gameplay experience, and I think there's quite a few things like that.
It's so much cleaner. Even though graphically, I feel like the graphics are better in BO6, maybe not necessarily this map, the actual shaking is what ruins the clarity of the movement. Yep. So like right here, the gun is fairly clear as soon as we're standing still. But as soon as we drop shot, it introduces a little bit of wobble to the gun and introduces a little bit of blurriness. So you can go ahead and see that there. It's not insane.
And I'll also note that with default settings, you end up with something like depth of field, and you got your camera movement and stuff like that. If you use the default settings in Black Ops 6, I wish he would have actually done that as well. That would have been huge. Like, I walked in, reset all my settings, and this is what the game's like with default settings on Modern Warfare 2019 and Black Ops 6 2024. That would have made a huge difference on the way that things look. Because don't get me wrong, there's depth of field in 2019, which is basically like the blurriness of the foreground or the background whenever you're like ADSing. And the difference would be insane because of all that shake that you get now, things that were added in Warzone 2, all that shake. It's immense, and the settings are also so crap, and they're supposed to be like cinematic. So if these people were to actually look at that, it might be pretty wild how it would affect just the casual player that hops on and just wants to play.
Obviously at 1440p, it's going to look clear, but at 1080p on a console or whatever, you're going to introduce a little bit more issues. Okay, I checked weapon swap speed. It didn't look particularly a big difference there. I didn't try it with amped. Obviously, we had that perk. It was kind of a default perk that you kind of had to use. And then in Warzone 2, they made it super clunky. Then in Warzone 3 or MW3's integration, they made it so we got the perk by default. So it sped up the game quite a bit. I think they need to do something similar to that. And improve the reload time so that we can actually have faster reloads across the board.
I think that's one thing that Warzone 3 did right, is that they added in these default perks, things that allowed you to run a little bit quicker. You could, you know, like reload properly while running around. You were able to like drop from a higher distance. You like stuff like that. I'm gonna sneeze. Don't sneeze. But you were able to do stuff like that. And it felt a lot smoother, and that's the exact reason that it, like, everything felt much better in Warzone 3 than it does in Black Ops 6. It's less about the fact that the engine changed. I think, again, we keep getting lost on this like whole engine change, and the reality is they just got rid of the quality of life things that already existed. Black Ops 6 could technically, like the Black Ops 6 version of Warzone, could have no issue just adding in those default perks into Warzone. Right? That could exist. No issue whatsoever. All the stuff that existed in Warzone 3 could absolutely, positively, no doubt about it, exist in this new version. However, for whatever reason, the ego of Treyarch, and don't get me wrong, I love Treyarch games. I like my first video I ever posted was me doing a sniper montage on Black Ops 1. I love Treyarch games. But I don't like when companies come in with a massive ego and they're like, we know how to do it better. When in reality, they make it worse every single time because you have this ego and you think that if you do it this way, it'll be better. I'd love to know how the integration actually worked, whether it was a Raven being like, all right, we're going to try and do all this stuff, or if it was Treyarch being like, you have to do all this stuff. I think that is very questionable because I know that Raven was the ones that made everything work a lot better, like a lot better. And they're the ones that whenever Warzone 1 came out, you know what happened when Raven took over? All the bugs that were plaguing Warzone 1 in Verdansk, when Raven got their hands on the game, they're the ones that fixed it. Every single time there's something wrong with Warzone, Raven Software comes in and saves the day. So I would have a hard time believing that Raven are standalone, the ones that screwed up this integration. I would bet it's the company that was solely focused on multiplayer. So just my thought.
See how much the movement's happening. I didn't even put the dots on there because I felt like it wasn't even necessary for how big a difference it was. So this is the HDR on the top, and this is the L762 gun that we currently have in Black Ops 6. And you can see it's way dramatic what's going on there.
The idle laser moves, we can also
see kind of how it's.
Hold on. So look at the laser though. So the crosshairs in one place. You see how the laser on the bottom is right there in the center? I again, zoom in with your fingers if you're on your phone. But you see how the crosshair is right, or the crosshair and the laser are right there in the center. But if I press play, the laser goes here, the crosshair goes off to the side. What the hell, bro? Like, how is this something that even makes sense for the company to do? Again, I would like to remind you, this is not a mill sim. It is not. It never has been. Call of Duty has never been a mill sim. It has always been an arcade shooter. I don't know if you know that. I don't know who got lost along the way, but it has always been an arcade shooter. So for something like this to happen, it just like boggles my mind that we get lost along the way and we're trying to find our identity every freaking year, bro.
6, and you can see it's way dramatic what's going on there. The idle sway, we can also see kind of how much it drifts. The screen when you ADS. MW 2019 wasn't perfect. It wouldn't go to direct to center. I think at MW3, it ended up having a better aim down sight physics for the snipers, particularly. When you aim down sight, it would go to the same spot wherever that white dot was on the screen. For whatever reason, MW 2019, they had a version of it the same way we do now. Their version was a little bit more subtle. So I would hope that eventually we'd get back to the version that we had in MW3 and then combine that with MW 2019's so we get like the best of both worlds. Because
okay, what he's saying right now is that when you ADS a sniper, right, there's this like natural 8-figure that happens. That's called ADS sway, right? You see it on this, right, hold on, where is it? Right there. ADS figure 8, whatever you want to call it. It's randomized ADS sway is what it is. When you ADS, it will go to a random spot. So let's say you put your white dot's right here, right? Sometimes when you ADS, if you start here, by the time the ADS sway hits, you're actually down here. So if someone's head's right here, you could shoot beside them if you were not at a super close distance. And that's what we saw in Warzone 2, and it was horrendous. However, I don't really know what he's talking about here. I didn't know what he's saying, because when I was playing way back in the day, I was on mouse and keyboard, and I'm telling you, I could use the Car 98K and the Swiss, and I could ADS, and I'd hit their head every single time. I got really, really good at centering on mouse and keyboard way back in the day. I could literally just aim right at their head, like put the center dot on their head. I made a whole video talking about this back in the day, and it got like 200,000 views, and you just center on their head, you ADS, and you click. That's it. That's all sniping was back in Warzone 1. So to hear him say this is actually kind of crazy. I mean, I'm not saying he's crazy. I'm saying I didn't know this. Maybe it was just so subtle that I had no idea.
I think there were some elements where it was better and some worse. Strafe speed. Both of these are the stock version. We're going to go ahead and ADS, and then they start strafing 15 meters at the same distance. Same time, same everything. I synced it up. And you can see that BO6 is faster.
Ooh.
Like it hits the wall. And look how much it takes to hit the wall over there. Boom. And then we have also the straightforward walking, 15 meters.
Okay, pause. I need to know, he has the meta setup on the Black Ops 6 gun and the meta setup on the MP5, right? The C9 has a meta setup, the Black Ops, or the MP5 has a meta setup, but these meta setups are technically different, right? So my question is, are those the same when it comes to strafe speed? Like, did you set it up to where the meta loadout is actually one on the C9 that has better strafe speed? Because at this point, it would probably be better to do completely default. I'm not sure if he has the meta setup or if he has the default on right now. I think, sorry, I'm just a little confused and I don't know.
This one's 23 and it goes all the way down to 8. So we'll go ahead and hit 0 here and 8 at the top. And
it definitely looks like you're strafing faster on Black Ops 6, though. I will note that.
You can see it's a little bit faster. So base movement speed is a little bit faster. So any residual clunkiness primarily has to do with the gun animations that are causing a lot of these issues to make it feel sluggish and less snappy. They also, in MW2, they did introduce a system that removed prone blockage. We have this
MW 2019 prone block made me lose my freaking mind, bro. You would try and lay down, prone would be blocked. You try and stand up, standing up would be blocked. You literally just be stuck in one position and you die to it all the time. Now you don't do that. That's kind of the nice thing about Omni movement, is that you can just dive backwards and your body will fix itself however it needs to fix itself. It's much better in my personal opinion.
Prone, or whatever the heck it's called, that allows you to turn 360 degrees while on the ground.
I think it's really nice.
In MW 2019, we were prone blocked, so that's night and day.
So what he's saying is when you're on the ground, you would try and turn and you'd be stuck because you're prone. You'd have something behind you. Now your character will lay on its back, turn over to its stomach. Like it'll do the whole thing where you're just like turning like you would in real life. Like you're kind of like rolling over like you would in real life. And I like that much better. One thing he didn't mention here is that sometimes it doesn't happen now, but even in Modern Warfare 3, every integration up until Black Ops 6, which again, I'm going to give props, truly a good job on the movement. I think they did an incredible job on the movement in Black Ops 6. I think there's obviously some bugs, and that's the problem that I have with the game, but the movement is huge. I think they did a great job into integrating some really, really like better mechanics. But the thing is sometimes like you would turn, and after you hit a certain point, and I don't know why this was, but every game up until now, you would move to like this point, and then as you slowly started to turn a little bit more, you'd slow down, right? You could literally full send your thumbstick and you do this, and it's the most frustrating thing. But again, I'm very glad that got fixed.
day difference. Slide to fire. We can see that there is a little bit of delay on this one. And then when we come through, this one's still a little bit faster, and I'm not even using any attachments. Ergonomic and all that could be...
Okay, did you hear what he just said? So that answered a question from earlier. He wasn't using any attachments, and it looked like the exact same match that he was in earlier. So that's what I would say. And this is huge. The slide to fire time in Black Ops 6 being much faster is much better.
Sped up insanely fast. Snaking, it was pretty broken in MW 2019. They've had snaking in like, I don't know, 12 or 13 different CODs. And normally the devs go out of their way to try to tune it. What we can see right here is it's going to look really glitchy when Attach does it in MW 2019. And they've gone out of their way to smooth this out, specifically each iteration. And they've solved a way to do it. And you'll
to be clear, for those of you that don't understand, snaking is when you are standing, you drop to prone, you stand, you drop to prone, you stand, you stop and drop to prone. So it looks like you're a snake doing this. That's kind of the idea of it. And that's specifically what he's talking about. So he's saying that they smoothed that out now.
See that Black Ops 6 looks way smoother. Black Ops 6 is probably the better game design one because how glitchy it is. Look at how you can see it kind of like stutter. And then on the bottom one, it looks very smooth. So they got the timing down a little bit better, so it matches in-game a little bit more consistently. Obviously, it's more of an exploit, just like slide canceling was to reset your tactical sprint, but they never corrected it, so people got used to it, and that's what they wanted from the gameplay.
Funny enough, I had this gripe for a long time whenever it comes to slide canceling. I was a firm believer that slide canceling should absolutely be in a game. However, if they are to have it, it should not reset your tac sprint. And I know a lot of people are actually a proponent to try and get that to reset your tac sprint because they got really used to Modern Warfare 2019. But I think that you should just be able to run. You should not be forced to constantly spam a button. The number of times that I had to go through a controller because of that was way too damn many. And it's part of the reason that I switched to mouse and keyboard. I'm not going to lie to you. Whenever the game first came out in 2019, or technically 2020 Warzone, I would play and I went through a controller and I was like, I can't afford it. There's no way that I'm going to do this. I had spent $1,000 over the last year for controllers. So I didn't like that to play the game, you had to slam a button on your controller 24/7. Now you can just pull out a knife and run. It's so much smoother. I much prefer this. And you can still slide cancel. You still have the ability to slide and cancel that slide so that you can have an opportunity to outplay your enemies. And I think that is much, much better.
That's a whole other story. Jump ADS. So one of the things I want to talk about too is obviously it's kind of hard. I'd have to go frame by frame and compare it. But basically what you're looking for is the outline of the gun for both of these. And what ends up happening is because of the crosshairs and ADS and the gun movement, it feels like a lot more is happening in Black Ops 6. And then in MW 2019, it ends up looking more snappy because it doesn't have these other animations going on, even though the speeds aren't dramatically different. Like if you look at them side by side, Black Ops 6 doesn't go crazy, but it has a weightiness to it, which I get from a realistic perspective.
Again, it doesn't matter if it's realistic. It is an arcade shooter. And this is why we keep getting lost and why integrations are so very different every single time is there's a certain amount of realism that sure, let's make sure that we have guns from real life. Let's make sure that the characters don't look like cartoons, which ironically we have that now. But my point is like, there's only so much you can do to make something realistic before you take the fun out of it for the vast majority of people that are just hopping on to have a good time. So yes, it's fine to be snappier. It feels better to click a button and an ADS is faster. That is a very, very good.
But overall, I'm not a fan of because it makes it feel like the game is clunkier. I ended up playing 2019 for about 45 minutes, getting some B-roll, messing around, testing some stuff. And overall, I felt like the game felt slower and less smooth that we've been accustomed to over some of the iterations because it's like the original version of MW 2019 before Warzone went in and changed some stuff. I still think MW3 had some better stuff, and it's kind of sucks because it's like, I just want the best from all of them, right? Yeah. Give me the best from all of them. And the reality is we end up with like, okay, cool. We got one new thing that's really good. And then we got rid of all the other stuff that we liked. And now it feels like crap.
Yeah, it's such a big issue. And I've been talking about this a lot. This is what I talk about when I say bugs are the issue. Like the constant problems that come with an integration are the problem. It's not the integration itself. I think the COD community as a whole does not enjoy change, right? I fully get that. However, if it is a positive change, they are much more likely to adapt to that and have fun with it quickly. And then you get something where the game comes out, Caldera came out, right? The first map change, people couldn't play it. Literally, like most console players had a massive struggle getting on the game. All right, we lose a massive audience. Cool. Warzone 2 comes out. Everybody's dev-airing. Like, even though, like, don't get me wrong, Warzone 2, it was rough. Made no sense. Their data completely lost. I have no idea who at Infinity Ward was like, we should make the slowest game possible and ensure that everyone hates it. What? Who is this how you sell bundles? That's crazy. But my point is, like, with that game, bad integration. Like, it could have been fine, could have been good. They had the biggest opportunity ever with Warzone 2, but people couldn't even play the game. It wasn't about whether or not they had memorized these mechanics. It was literally the game becomes physically unplayable because of bugs. And then moving into Warzone 3, we get the best integration we've had so far. However, it comes out, there's still a ton of bugs. How do we do this again? It keeps happening. Ironically, the only thing that didn't have a ton of bugs was Rebirth, and it's probably why people switched to Rebirth, is there wasn't a ton of bugs. It had gotten ironed out pretty quick. And then now with Black Ops 6, you're not going to believe it, but there was a ton of bugs. And so I keep saying, like, the problem is they cannot put together multiple games and do it cohesively. Something has to break. We lose out on a ton of things and we go back 53 steps. It's 3 steps forward, 53 steps back. So we're behind 50 freaking steps every single time there's an update. And it's the most incredibly annoying thing. And it's why the audience keeps leaving. Sure, we're going to get Verdansk next year. Everybody's so excited. And don't get me wrong, I'm preparing for that right now. That's literally why I've been posting my ass off, is because I know that we're going to get Verdansk back. There's going to be a big opportunity with Warzone, and I want to take advantage of that. However, if they push this update, and they have not settled every single bug before they put it out, and in some capacity the game is unplayable, I want you to know the amount of players they're going to come back is going to be more than what we saw with Warzone 2. And I kid you not, if they ruin it, Call of Duty will be dead. What Warzone will be just completely done. If they ruin it, that could literally kill it for like final, because that is what people have been waiting on. That is what people have been asking for. Nostalgia is the biggest drug you can have. And I'm telling you, if they get it right, Warzone might be back. I ain't gonna play it. Warzone could be back. But boy, oh boy, I don't know if that's what's going to happen. I really don't.
Warzone 2 really set the franchise back. I don't think they really intended to ever have this many integrations. Yep. I think originally when Warzone first dropped, to my knowledge, it was supposed to be a standalone, that's Correct. It, like Blackout. But it was so popular, obviously COVID played a role in that the player counts drove so high, obviously free to play, maybe multiplayer will be free to play at some point, same with zombies. But regardless, then they added in Cold War and then Vanguard.
So speaking of that, I do want to let you know, this is some back end information. If you didn't know, they actually made a whole map that never saw the light of day. There was an entire map that was supposed to come with Cold War, and it was supposed to be Blackout 2. They were making Blackout 2. I'm very serious about this. Warzone was supposed to be gone, but because it was so big, they wanted to keep that ball rolling, which ironically, I wish that they would do with the multiplayer games and just take the games that are good and just keep that ball rolling. But they decided to keep pushing with it, and they wanted to just update it. And the issue is they were incredibly slow with it. They never intend to do a ton of updates. I don't know if you know this, but their goal is to constantly do the least amount of work and give players the least amount to make the most, basically. But the big thing is, Warzone, after a year, was supposed to be gone. I actually saw footage, leaked footage. I don't know if it's available on YouTube or not now, but behind closed doors, I had heard a lot of things about leaks and stuff like that, and I got reached out to, or a friend of mine got reached out to, and we saw footage of it, and we literally watched this guy run around the map, and he was looting like Blackout and things of that nature. and he was playing on the Blackout map because you could actually pull it from the Cold War files. Isn't that crazy? So when Cold War was in beta mode, they sent out the freaking Blackout 2 with it, and data miners could go in and they could pull it and they could figure out how to put it together and they could play the map. So I saw it and it looked pretty cool. I mean, I think it would have been pretty great, but they decided to continue with Warzone. And now I don't know what would have been better at this rate. I think Warzone has a big opportunity, but are they going to pull it off? I don't know.
And they're like, ooh, we didn't really build this thing. The foundation was very weak.
Yep.
And we didn't really build it to be stacking up on top. And that's why we were able to have some consistency for those years, even though each integration was busted. And then when we jumped into Warzone 2, I think the people at COD really thought that this was the future of Call of Duty. And
that was the whole thing that they said with COD Next. This is the next integration of Call of Duty Warzone 2. Bruh.
We're just so wrong. They couldn't have been more wrong about the franchise and the direction of the franchise and what the players wanted. They had some of the worst player retention in the history of the franchise, to my knowledge. The drop-off needs to be studied how bad it was.
True story.
Essentially, they spent a year trying to fix what they did, but obviously when you change the engine a certain way, I'm sure it's more technical. They ended up getting to something that was decent in MW3, but the vision was always to have Omni movement included in it, and it just didn't pan out well. There's too many bugs. I think Omni movement as a whole is good. I think there's a lot.
I want to pause right here, and I need you to understand something. Omni movement had to have been a thought since the day that Warzone 2 dropped. That's like, imagine, because it was a 4-year cycle, right? And it's been 2 years, right? So my guess is maybe they were working on campaign first. Maybe they were working on zombies first. But I'm just sitting here thinking, and like, the change in engine had to have happened within these last 2 years. So Omni movement only took about 2 years, because otherwise everything would have stuck with this Warzone 2 engine. And I'm just like thinking to myself how much of a change they had to do in the last 2 years of development, simply because of how much people hated Warzone 2. And that's probably why we're looking at such a busted game. There's so many things that could have led to this, but I do think it's very funny when you actually think about the development cycle and the fact that everybody's like, well, the game had 4 years. Why is it broken? About halfway through, they kind of had to completely change everything. And so they waited probably until the last second to even think about Warzone.
A lot of good things with Black Ops 6 being carried over, less backpacks, whatever. They simplified the game to make it really good, but they still haven't figured out, let's remove the visual shake of weapons. Let's move the realism. Let's remove the slow reload times. Let's remove the weapon swap that we already know the players have liked from these certain iterations, and make the perfect game. Going forward, though, I think we're going to get to a point where everything's going to be on the Omni movement side. So we'll see where it goes from there. Hopefully you enjoyed the.
I will note, behind the scenes, or even I saw somebody tweet this out. It was a leaker or whatever. And apparently there's a team coming into Call of Duty that are going to focus on what big changes should and shouldn't go. Like literally like a board of people. They're going to come in and be like, all right, this change makes sense. This change bad will hurt player base. I think there's a team that's being formed right now. I could be wrong. This could be complete and utter bull, right? But I don't think it is. I think it makes sense that every single time there's an integration, it's way too freaking huge, and everybody tries to reinvent the wheel, and then they forget the things that are actually important, which are the little details, the little things that have gotten improved, the quality of life updates that have made the game better over and over and over. And every single time there's an update, for some reason they forget those things. And so it would be nice if this board of people could come in and be like, yep, we're going to keep this. We're going to get rid of this. We're going to update this. We're going to upgrade this. I think that would be truly incredible. And if Activision does something like that, it would be so nice. I would be so happy to see, all right, well, we're actually keeping Omni movement. That's 100% staying, right? We're keeping it. Black Ops 6 like style is staying in Warzone. I would actually be very happy with that. I would have no issue with it. But I want every single quality of life change that we've had in the past. all the things that JGod just mentioned here, I would love to see make their way into the game. And there's a big opportunity for it. It's just whether or not Call of Duty is going to do that, or if they're going to keep looking at erroneous data that actually tells you nothing and is only focused on player retention, but player retention doesn't equal fun, and fun is actually what retains players. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Listen, hey, it'd be greatly appreciated if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel. Obviously, again, I have JGod's video down in the description down below if you want to watch it by yourself, you want to check things out over there. Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you for coming through. I have some other great videos that you should definitely check out on the channel. And a lot of them are super, super informative. I try and go through, and I know it's annoying. I try and go through and I pause whenever I have something to say that is obviously a lot of it's opinion, but a lot of it is based in research and things like that. So I try and share in a lot of my other videos things fully based in research so that you can learn as much as you can about the world that is Call of Duty and not have to listen to someone basically shout out things that make absolutely zero sense and have no research behind them. Either way, thanks so much. I hope you have a good day. See ya. Get out of here. That was stupid. All right, I'm leaving.